Akira. Akira, or how I've heard it pronounced by a lot of people, is just Akira. And I might say that by accident, but I think I should be pronouncing it Akira, but whatever. So, I have the manga right here, but we are going to be talking about the film, just to be clear. We're going to be talking about the film. I actually have not read these yet. I have them, and I'm glad I have them, and I'm going to read them soon, but I have not read them yet. The film is the first anime that I ever saw, and to this day still it is my favorite, and I have not seen much anime to begin with. So this isn't coming from like a super fan of anime, this is just coming from a fan of good stuff. A fan of art, a fan of media, music, movies, visual art, poetry, books, all of that. I'll give you some quick facts, and then we'll get into kind of my journey with Akira and why I think you should watch it, and why it's amazing, and kind of recap some of the events. So there will be some spoilers, but I will try to entice you to watch the film before I give you the spoilers, and I'll let you know when they're coming. So, quick facts. The manga came out in 1982, and the film came out in 1988. Those are your quick facts. That's it right now. My journey with the movie started when I was too young to watch it. I know that I was like 10 or under, and I say I was too young just because I feel I was. I was definitely really freaked out by it. I do not recall watching the whole thing, but I had a babysitter who came over and had it and was watching it while I was there, and it was like before bedtime, and some scenes really stuck with me, and like I said, I don't recall watching all of it. I had no freaking idea what was going on, and it wasn't until years later, I think I was in high school, that I came across it, and I was like, yo, this is that thing that really freaked me out when I was a kid. And I don't remember exactly what I had heard about it or why I decided to check it out. That part is a little hazy. I don't recall those details because it was a while ago. And then I ended up burning the DVD, and then I ended up finally buying the DVD, or someone bought it for me, honestly. I can't remember right now. Might have been a gift, and a great gift it was. So I just watched it again the other day as I was showing somebody for the first time, and that's why it's fresh in my mind and I want to talk about it. So this is a long journey that I've had with Akira, about more than 20 years, and I've seen it maybe 4 times in that period, and there's a reason why I haven't chosen to watch it more, which I'm going to get into. But let's get into telling you a little more about it, and why I'm reviewing it in the first place, why I believe it's amazing and you should check it out, and it is influential. So I already said it's based off of the manga that came out in 1982. The film came out in 1988. It is a post-apocalyptic dystopian type of story. That is the setting. We're in Neo-Tokyo, is what it's called. This is after World War III, and there's some debate as to what started World War III, but in the wake of that, there's a lot of political stuff going on. There's protests in the street, anti-government stuff, there's cults, there's, these social movements and things happening. It's kind of happening in the background, but it's also very much part of the story and at the forefront, and I don't know how to explain that yet, but we'll get there. This film is really influential in a lot of ways. For anime, it broke some boundaries. It paved the way for some other things and attitudes and processes. So one thing that I like figuring out is where people took their inspiration from. I like to know and understand all the steps and the processes of how we got to this and what their influences were. And it's one of those cool things I like when something is referencing something else, because there's inspiration usually, the vast majority of times, it's not wholly original. We have an idea, we like that idea, we got that idea from somewhere, whether it be what color to use in a painting that we saw somebody wearing that day, or, whatever. So, I can't remember the name of the director, and I probably would butcher the pronunciation anyway. But the director of Akira, he took some influence from Tron, specifically with some of the lighting techniques on the bikes and the fact that there were these motorized bikes, these futuristic bikes. That is also coming from the original manga, but this is also in black and white. I don't know if they colored it at all back then. Yeah. He took some direction there with the lighting and working it into the bikes. And then he took some inspiration from Blade Runner, which came out in 1982. Again, the film came out in 1982. We're going to get into the other layer of that in a second. But he took some inspiration from Blade Runner, specifically with their scenery and their buildings and how this like kind of cyberpunk style was being created there. And he took a lot of inspiration from that and put that into the architecture of Neo Tokyo. Now, the thing about Blade Runner is that is built off of a novel by Philip K. Dick, which is called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and that came out in 1968. So that was 20 years before Akira. So we've got these levels and whatever, and I could keep going and it'd get really meta, and I wonder what Philip K. Dick was inspired by to create that novel and write that, but that's where we'll kind of leave it. So all of those things are really cultural touchstones I think that most people have heard of. I know I heard of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. I haven't read it yet. I have it. As for Blade Runner, I've seen Blade Runner, and it's a great movie. I haven't seen the second one yet, just in case you're wondering. But there's another thing that the director of Akira took from Blade Runner as inspiration, and that was the year. They are both set in 2019, which is interesting because the last time I had seen it, it was before 2019. I hadn't seen it for maybe 4 or 5 years, if not a little longer. And so this time around, I was like, oh, snap. Like, we're past that date that this is set in, and that's really interesting. It's always just a really cool thing when you get to see what people thought the future might be like. That's not necessarily what it was trying to do, was like predict what the future would be like, but it's still set in that time, and obviously it's kind of like an alternate universe type thing, and different things happened, and it's not built off of like the legitimate history of our world that we are present in to this day. So, why should you watch it? If you're into certain things, then you may enjoy it. What are those things? One, if you like anime, then you might want to watch it. But I'm going to approach this as if you don't like anime, because I am incredibly picky with anime. So one of the things that I really like, I'm learning about my likes and dislikes the more I watch. I definitely like darker stuff in general, with a lot of the art that I take in and enjoy. And that's no different than with anime. I definitely am more into stuff that has this darker feel, but that is challenging. It's cerebral. It's not just fun and light, and that's it. I do like some of that stuff. Some really basic stuff, like, let's say, Sailor Moon. That's really nostalgic for me, so like it's easy for me to get into, but it's not super challenging. Whereas Akira is. Things like Ghost in the Shell, from my understanding, conceptually also a little more challenging, a little darker. I like the aspect of dystopia. We get into some science fiction-y stuff. There's definitely some big questions that we might be asking during films or stories like Ghost in the Shell or Akira or whatever. So if you're into that kind of vibe, something a little more edgy, has a darker feel, engages you and challenges you, then this would be something I think you might be interested in. Again, I don't watch many animated things. That's just not my thing. I just don't. But this crosses that boundary for me. It wasn't appealing to me because it was animated or it was anime or whatever. It had all these other things about it that I was like, wow, that was really amazing. And it took me to a weird place, which is why I don't watch it that often. We'll get into that in the spoiler section. Um, well, I don't watch it often. So there's some violence. Um, some of it's a little bit of overkill. Um, the music is amazing. The coloring is amazing. The animation like the effects, the stuff they were doing there visually is quite stunning, and the story is a really interesting story. There's only one flaw for me, and that's the second half of this kind of drags. Um, the first half is really just kind of packed with like what is going on and kind of putting it all together, and the second half kind of slows it down a lot. And it's a long movie. It's 2 hours and 5 minutes, I think. It's a little bit over 2 hours, and I think that maybe like I wouldn't know what to cut, but I'm just saying that the second half can definitely drag. I feel like it's done that for me every time I've watched it. I get tired. It's still really good, and there's things that happen in that second half that are important. Obviously, like, maybe saying second half is too generous, but like the last third is definitely just kind of like, okay, it's things just slow down so much, and we kind of have the picture now. We're waiting for it to wrap up, and it doesn't necessarily wrap up as quick as I'd like, but it's still a masterpiece. It's still phenomenal. It's still great. Like that's the only thing that I can say against it. So that's like a 9 out of 10 stars, or like a 9 point something, just not 10 out of 10. Why is it important? Why is it influential? One of the main things that it did at the time, breaking boundaries, crossing markets, was that it didn't cater to Western audiences. A lot of stuff that was getting created at the time was trying to break into these markets and pandering to them a bit, and taking a lot of influence, too much influence, from things like Disney. Like Astro Boy was one of those things that... sorry. Astro Boy was one of those things that was kind of like... It's... not necessarily what they would have done if they weren't looking at Disney. And there's a reason why they want to break into Western audiences. It's because of finances, obviously. They want to be able to appeal to more people so they can make more money. And we're going to get into that in a second here, because that's kind of important with what else we're talking about. So... they took influence from some Western, media like Blade Runner and Tron, but they built off of that and did it in their own natural way and created a very different beast. And they weren't trying to copy or use these more juvenile, safe, cute animation styles from the U.S. They wanted to just make it authentically them as possible. And so we have this film that is one of the first animations that was widely distributed that is not meant for kids. There's stuff that happens here that is just it's not meant for kids. Not just incidental stuff in the story that's like visually like maybe too much for kids to see at some point until there's some more maturity there, but just the concepts in here are a little bigger than I would say children would be grasping onto or even interested in, or could even understand. So it was not meant for children. So this is one of those things that crossed markets, opened up a genre, and was really influential because it was successful. Now, I said I was going to get back to money and budget, and that's right here, because they spent millions of dollars on this film. I don't remember the amount now, and I should have written it down, but huge budget, huge risk, but it paid off, and huge reward. They definitely recouped their costs multiple times over, and then influenced so many things, that came after it, right? And a big part of that was the fact that they did what they wanted to do, and they didn't censor it for U.S. audiences. They didn't change this or change that. There's a lot of things they did that cost so much money, but they wanted to do it, like, I don't want to say right, but they wanted to do it in their way. And part of that was, like, one of the things I read about was that the lighting, the light sources. So, like, we see like tracers from the bikes when they're moving, and like they hand painted like all these single cells and stuff, and it was just crazy. There was just so much man hours put into this thing through just wanting to create this work, and like I said, it paid off. But that's one of the reasons why it became amazing. That they didn't pull punches. They did what they wanted to do, and they weren't concerned. They weren't concerned about making it Western audience friendly. I'm sure there was some concern about, we spent all this money, we need to get this money back, and how are we going to do that if we don't have certain audiences engaged in this? But he didn't want to compromise what he wanted to do, the director, so he did what he needed to, and then it found an audience. And then it's almost like a new genre being born in a way, because we have something that is not meant for kids, but it's a cartoon, it's an animation, it's like, but I thought that was kid stuff, and here we have Akira, which it's not. So that kind of really opened things up. Here's your spoiler alert. Alright. So, I'm going to get into talking a little bit about what's in the film. If you are still listening and or watching, that's cool. I still think that you will be able to maintain, I don't want to say a level of enjoyment, but I think you'll be able to get out of this film what you're supposed to, even if you listen to this part, where I kind of recap some things. So, basically, I already mentioned World War III has passed. We're in the year 2019. There's all these social movements happening, protesting the government. There's like these cults, and these cults actually, I shouldn't say plural, we know of one for sure, is worshiping Akira. And what is Akira? We don't really know for a long time. We've got we've got two stories happening. We've got the story of where Neo-Tokyo is politically, socially, the people, the unrest, the reasons why, and that's unfolding in its own way. But we also have what I would say the main story is, this other one isn't background. I mean, it is, but it's so important, it definitely is pushed into the foreground because the setting is huge for the characters. So we have our characters Kaneda and Tetsuo. There are two really main characters. They are in a biker gang, and here in Neo-Tokyo, these teenage bike gangs are like rampant. It's just what they do. It's just this thing. These guys are like scrubs. They take off from school. They steal bikes. They steal other things. They aren't going to school. They don't care about school. They go and fight these other bike gangs. They're just no good. And there is a point where a mysterious child shows up, because someone is trying to protect the child, and it kind of shows up, and it's during one of these bike war fights. I don't know what to call it. And these two worlds collide of this social, political stuff that's happening in the background, and then our main characters, and basically this child has contact with Tetsuo, who already is a character that we understand some of the flaws there are, but before he meets this young child. And he doesn't like being told what to do. He doesn't want to be rescued. He doesn't want to be saved. He is very stubborn. It seems like he was in positions where he needed to be taken care of, and that's why he resents it. Kaneda really cares about him, and is kind of like an older brother figure, and also has like a cooler bike and whatever, and teases Tetsuo and whatever, but in a loving way. Anyway, so we're in a position here where some stuff happened, and then this child has made contact with Tetsuo, and then this child is being taken away by these crazy secret military government people, and they end up taking Tetsuo with them as well. They say they're taking him to a hospital, but they don't. They have this like crazy secret compound thing, and they've been running experiments on these children. And that is what some of the protests are about. And we find out that there are these groups that are protesting the government for a lot of reasons, but one of them is the fact that they're doing these experiments on kids and stuff. And I guess they've had this thing going on in the background for years, and one of the children was Akira, who at times is kind of talked about as more of a force and an element more so than a child or a person, because that person doesn't exist anymore, but their essence is still there. So they were running these experiments, and honestly, I'm still confused as to what they were trying to accomplish with the experiments, but, you know, they thought that maybe Akira started World War III, it's an incredibly powerful, you know, source of energy. Some of these children that we meet, they look old. They are young, but in their stature and their physique, but they look very old and wrinkled. Whatever has happened here for these tests tests and experiments have accelerated the aging process for them, at least in looks, and changed some things about them. They have like telekinetic powers and can do certain things. Some people say that actually another show that I haven't watched yet, but Stranger Things kind of drew upon some of the themes in Akira as well. And they start doing experiments on Tetsuo because they recognize that he has either, because he's been in contact with this child, or he just innately inside of him has a certain amount of energy that he would be a good subject to experiment on. So they start doing that. However, his attitude isn't right for this. And the combination of his attitude and power create a horrible scenario for everybody. Because we have Kaneda trying to rescue Tetsuo, and then we also have someone he meets up with, which is very much into this like social political movement of protesting the government and doing stuff and going very far with like a secret group to have these crazy operatives and they like are targeting the government and trying to protect these kids and kidnap these kids and take them away, and like they are anti-establishment and they do some violent acts in the name of the greater good. He meets up with one of these people. They have their own agenda. He has his, but their goals are kind of the same to get into this complex. So they do that. And, you know, this whole time Tetsuo is gaining power. He doesn't understand it. He's accelerating too quickly. He's not adjusting. Again, he already has a horrible attitude to begin with. The children are scared of him. The children don't like him. They say big people like you shouldn't have this power because this is what you do with it. And he's like bullying them with these powers, and he's just messing it all up. He's really causing some problems and a ruckus and a lot of physical damage to people and places. And basically that power just keeps accelerating, and they're trying to control it, and they can't. There's a scientist involved, and there's like a military leader involved, and there's like a council involved as well. And the military leader is very much trying to protect the best interests of Neo Tokyo, and the scientist is really wanting to push the limits and figure things out with this amazing test subject and see how far things can go. And so he pushes things further than he probably should at times, and therefore we have Tetsuo, who is much too powerful, much too quick, can't handle it, isn't the right disposition for this anyway, and there's this growing power inside of him he doesn't understand. And he's lashing out aggressively. And he wants to find Akira. Akira is like speaking to him. and he doesn't like it, and he wants to find him. And one of the reasons, I think, is to try to consume his power, or to just meet him for whatever reason. And we get to a point where there's been so much destruction while Tetsuo is basically on the run, while they're trying to maintain, or trying to contain him to a certain area of the city. And again, he's just lashing out aggressively. Tetsuo is just going wild, and Kaneda and like his friend, they are in pursuit of him, trying to take him down. The government people are trying to take him down as well. And we get to a point where the children combine their forces. Things Tetsuo has found Akira in like another different area, underground, like container ship thing that was holding Akira, but really it's just Akira's like parts in like formaldehyde like containers, and one thing I think was the optic nerve was there, and I think that is what is still enabling Akira to communicate with Tetsuo. This all just sounds wild, and I'm glossing over a lot of things. I mean, we've got story here that has to do with relationships between people, and then we've got this like crazy like anti-government post-apocalyptic world, and this supernatural stuff happening, and it seems like a lot. And obviously, I'm not going through every single little detail here either. Just kind of giving you a taste. But it is just all these elements combined in this great storytelling, fantastic visuals and music, and it is really engaging. But like I said, there's like the last third that slows down a lot while they are in pursuit of Tetsuo, while he's trying to figure out things, and the children are talking to him telekinetically and just like basically explaining the origins of Akira, is where things kind of go and get a little slow. And it's incredibly important to the story, but basically what ends up happening is that Akira ends up consuming Tetsuo, and the city of Neo Tokyo is pretty much leveled, and they both basically transcend the mortal plane. Akira probably already had done that. And we are left with some questions as to what the heck just happened. And one of the children is talking about this being just the beginning and how everything's going to be okay now. And why would things be okay right now? Like, it's wild. The thing is, as I mentioned, or I alluded to earlier, the movie makes me feel really weird. And it's really difficult not to get through. I mean, like, other than like the fact that it drags a bit. It's just that I forgot how weird I would feel, so I was more willing to watch it again. But now it's like, even if I had someone to show the movie to and was like excited to show it to them, I don't know if I'd watch it anytime soon, because it just like messes me up. It just like makes me think about mortality way too much, and it does it in this really weird subversive way. It's not like a regular thing that I think would trigger that response from me. It doesn't just like throw it in your face. There's a lot of subtle things going on in this film that just push you to think about things and to challenge, your thoughts about the future and technology and how people could bond with that, about government stuff, about shady dealings, about human relationships, about even things like why can't I think? The like simulation theory or whatever. So or just human consciousness, right? Like that you might not need a body to have human consciousness, and like uploading yourself to the cloud and all this stuff is in there, and it seems like it's so far ahead of its time, and it's just wild. I definitely say give it a watch if you haven't. It's done really well. I wouldn't recommend it for children. I mean, what age would I recommend it? I think if you're in your teens, I think that would be okay. Depending on where you're at with maturity, you still might not understand a lot of it, but whatever. That's a whole different thing. I'm gonna wrap it up there. Again, Akira, it's pretty accessible. It just blew the doors wide open. Accessible, I mean like you can find the DVD somewhere. I don't know if it's on a streaming service, but you can find the DVD. You can buy it. It's not that difficult. It is probably one of the most famous animes I think there is now. And we've gone past the 30-year anniversary of it, which is buck wild. So, yeah, ahead of its time. Great everything, great animation and effects and visuals and the music and storytelling. And again, this is not coming from like this huge anime fan. It's just coming from a fan of art, and it is wonderful. And with that, we'll see you on another time.